Hi, my name is Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're having a good start to your reading year. So let's kick off my January wrap up with the books I've read in the first week of January. So the first book I picked up this year was Heartstopper Volume 5. This I read on New Year's Day and it was a lovely way to start my reading year. This is obviously a graphic novel, the fifth in the series. In this one we follow Charlie is sitting his GCSE exams and Nick is considering university application, so it's sort of about the impact that potential separation could have on their relationship. It was an absolute delight to read. I really love this series and I also love the side characters in the book. I think there's just loads of great characters in this book, and I'm looking forward to reading Volume 6 whenever that comes out. So I am participating in the Past and Future Readathon in January, which is hosted by Emily from Novell Novels, Charlie from Charlie Brooke Reads, Jem from Gem of Books, Alice from Alice and Giant Bookshelf, Jack from Spread Book Joy, and Dani from Dani's Book World. I really hope I've remembered everyone because I didn't make a list. I think that's everyone. This fulfills the prompt series sort out. So I am up to date now with this series. Then the next book I picked up, I'll mention this, I've not finished it, but it's a short story collection. This is short stories from the 19th century selected by David Stuart Davies. It's a Wordsworth Classic Edition. So this fulfills the prompt of New Year's resolution, read a book that gets you off to a good start with a reading goal. So one of my reading goals for 2024 is to read short stories. I've got a number of short story collections on my TBR here, and my goal is not necessarily to read one full collection per month, but it's to make sure I am reading some short stories throughout the month. So I've read 3 from here so far and I've enjoyed all 3 actually. And what I like about these collections, particularly when they're from classic authors, is because I'm not a big classics reader, it gives me the opportunity to try different authors out. So the ones I've read from here so far are The Black Veil by Charles Dickens, The Withered Arm by Thomas Hardy, and The Terribly Strange Bed by Wilkie Collins. I love the titles of these stories. My favourite so far was probably The Terribly Strange Bed by Wilkie Collins. It was very dramatic and theatrical. I've not read any novels by Wilkie Collins, but I do have a copy of The Moonstone right there, which I may pick up later in the year. I feel like that might be a good classic to read in the autumn. So those are the short stories I've read so far. Then I read The Stranding by Kate Sawyer. So this fulfills the prompt, new edition. Read a recent addition to the TBR. So I got this as one of the books in my advent calendar that I've recently opened during December, and I decided which of those books I was going to pick up first in January based on which first line I liked the most, and this won that competition based on the first line of Tell Me Something You Miss from Before with a capital B. So this is a post-apocalyptic book. It is, the apocalypse sort of takes place off page in kind of a similar way to Leave the World Behind by Ruman Alam, although they are very, very different books. In this one, the main character is called Ruth, and she's recently travelled to New Zealand from England. And right at the start of the book, she's like on a beach in some fairly remote location, and like we know something drastic has happened. She finds someone else who is called Nick, who is from New Zealand, and together they take shelter in the mouth of a whale. So a whale has been beached on the shore and has just very recently died. So they take shelter in the mouth of the whale while some cloud or something passes over them in the sky. And I think everything gets covered in dust or something. So whatever it is, they've managed to be protected from it because they've been sheltering in the mouth of the whale. So then it's really their survival story. They don't really know what has happened because obviously there's no communication channels. The story is told in 2 timelines, so we also get Ruth's backstory, so leading up to her going to New Zealand. We see her life before. She is in a relationship with a married man who is really, really vile, and we see her sort of like family relations and so on. And in that back storyline, we do get little glimpses of signs that could indicate the impending apocalypse. But Ruth as a character doesn't pay much attention to the news. Like, she's sort of aware that terrible stuff is looming, but purposefully doesn't want to become too involved in the news and what's actually going on. So therefore, as readers, again, we only get sort of little side glimpses in that backstory of things that could signify what might be coming. I enjoyed this book. It was very, very readable, and it was actually quite moving in ways that I wasn't expecting. So it is a book that I would recommend. I think this author has a second novel as well, which I would potentially look up at some point. And then I just thought I'd mention this. For Christmas, I did get a book, and it was Murdle, Volume 1, which you've probably seen. I think it was like the bestseller at Christmas or something. So this is a collection of logic puzzles all around trying to solve a series of murders. So in each one you have to figure out who the murderer is, with what weapon, like in what room. And I am kind of obsessed with this, but I'm on to like the third. There are 4 difficulty categories throughout the book. I'm on to the 3rd level of difficulty, and it's quite difficult, which I find quite frustrating, but I'm very much enjoying this. So I think my reading's got off to a good start. I will check in with you once I've read some more stuff. It's now the 21st of January. It's a Sunday. I don't think I've filmed an update for a couple of weeks. But in that time I have DNF 2 books, finished 2 books, and started 3 more books. So we'll go through the DNFs first. First is The Mystery of Henri Pick by David Foenkinos, which I picked up for the Past and Future Readathon prompt of picking a book via a colour wheel. So the colour wheel chose for me teal. This was kind of the closest I had on my shelf. So this book is translated from French by Sam Taylor. I read about 40 or 50 pages of it before DNFing it. It does have an interesting premise. So it centres around this library where they have a certain section where people, authors who have not been published, can send their work, and the work just kind of lives in this library. So it's this library of unpublished books. And then one day this book is found there, and it's really, really good, and it gets published and it takes off, and it's really popular, and it's been written by this pizza chef who I think has since died, and the mystery is around how could no one suspected that he was an author. His wife had no idea. When was he writing this book? So it's an interesting premise, but I didn't really like the style of writing, and I also found that certain aspects of the story were just a little bit icky. Kind of in relation to the female characters. I mean, it wasn't anything overt. It was just, when you just feel like, I'm just not really liking this. So I did DNF that. I mean, does it count as ticking off a prompt for the challenge? Maybe not. I'm probably kind of going to count it because I'm unlikely to have time to get to another book in its place, but we'll see. Then my next DNF was Commonwealth by Patchett. So this one I picked up for the Ben Reads Good prompt. So the prompt for January is Annuary, read a book by an author called Anne. Commonwealth is a book I've been meaning to read for a little while now. Yeah, it was fine. I just wasn't really into it. It's about so the book opens with a family christening, and something happens at this christening, and then the next section of the book is we jump forward in time to one of the characters who I think was the baby who was being christened, and she's like at university or something. So it's really sort of a family drama. I think, so the reason I wanted to read this is because I'd heard that not necessarily it has a twist, but that there's something interesting in the way the story develops. But I think the blurb actually gives that away, to be honest. So at the point I DNF'd it, I looked up how the story was going to continue, and I do think the blurb gives that away. So I have DNF'd that one. So that was my Annuary prompt. Although, okay, so this next book, I think may kind of count for Annuary. I mean, it doesn't really, but let me know what you think. So I don't have a copy of this one because I took it back to the library already. So we'll put a picture up of it. And it was Misery by Stephen King. So I read this with my library book club. We really don't read a lot of horror. Like in 10 years, I can't think of another horror book that we've read. And sort of half the group, like, really quite enjoyed it. And the other half didn't really like it at all and sort of gave up on it because they found it too disturbing, which I can understand. So Misery, in case you don't know what it's about, there's an author called Paul Shelton who is in a car accident in sort of a vaguely sort of remote location, and then this other character called Annie Wilkes finds Paul and takes him to a house. He's badly damaged his leg or his ankle, so he's immobile. So she takes him to her house, puts him to bed, and is caring for him. She used to work as a nurse, but she doesn't call the police, she doesn't call the hospital, she doesn't seek to get him, you know, tell anyone that he's there or that he's had this accident. And so Paul is an author and Annie is his biggest fan, and he's written a series of books with a character called Misery, which she really, really loves. But he's actually killed off Misery, which Annie is not happy about, and she wants Paul to write another Misery novel, which he does while he is bedridden and unable to seek help. So within the book, it's quite interesting because we do get a little excerpt of the book, the Misery book that he is writing while he is in Annie's house. Obviously it's a horror novel. It was obviously made into a very famous film starring Kathy Bates, which is really, really good. I only saw that for the first time a few years ago. And Misery is a book that I have DNF'd in the past, but many years ago, for the reason being that I thought it was quite boring, and I do think it's slow to get started. But having seen the film, I was just picturing Kathy Bates as Annie, and that sort of encouraged me to keep going to the end of the book. And I had forgotten the ending, and there was quite a lot actually of the story, and particularly in relation to Annie's backstory, that I had kind of completely forgotten about. It is quite gruesome, and the final section of the book, and I'm not going to give any spoilers obviously, but the final section of that book is a really, really great horror finale. Just very cinematic, action-packed, really, really excellent. I will say I don't think Stephen King writes women very well. The book was published in the late 80s, and certainly based on the evidence of that book, there was a few occasions when it was just wildly offensive, to be honest, in relation to how he was describing women. Fortunately, there were not many characters in Misery, so, you know, not that much opportunity for King to have to describe people, which I think was a good thing. But overall, I did enjoy the book. So I don't know whether, can I count it for Annuary because of Annie Wilkes? Let me know what you think. So the next book that I finished was Maisy Dobbs by Jacqueline Winspear. So this fulfills the prompt from the Past and Future Readathon of having someone choose a book for you to read. So my girlfriend chose 3 books from my TBR shelves, and then my cat chose one of those 3 for me to read. The cat didn't actually choose this one, she chose a different one, which I ended up picking up at the end of December and DNFing, and it turned out I'd read it before anyway. It was a whole thing, it was in my December wrap-up. Well, this was one of the other ones that almost got selected, so I just went to this one instead. So I really enjoyed this, and it actually was not at all what I was expecting. So this is a mystery novel, historical mystery. It's set at the time of the First World War. And so Maisy Dobbs is a character who has opened her own like private investigation agency. And so the first part of the book is this man comes to seek her help because he has suspicions about his wife, and who keeps sort of like disappearing. He doesn't know where she's gone to. And so Maisie is tasked with solving this mystery. But then the whole middle section of the book is completely different. It's Maisie's backstory, it's her childhood, her education, leading up to the war. So it's almost like 2 books in one. The middle section, which I think takes up most of the book, it was really, really excellent historical fiction. I was so impressed. It was really, really good. And then the final part of the book, we loop back around to the original mystery, but that mystery sort of expands in its scope a little bit, and it links back into wartime and sort of wider issues. So it's not, I'd say it's not a stereotypical murder mystery, in the sense that it's not like, okay, we've got a murder, here's our suspects, you know, what are the possible motives and here's who done it. It's more sort of around the intrigue, and yeah, it's sort of a wider scope. I did like the book overall. I particularly, as I say, liked the Maisie backstory. And what's most exciting is that this is the first in a series. So I've looked it up, and I think there's 17 books in the series at the moment. And I think the final book, which will be the 18th book, is being released in June this year. So my plan is to read through the series in order. My library has a lot of them. I haven't looked into whether they actually have all of them. I know they definitely have book 2 and book 3. So my plan is to read the series in order, because I'm hoping that, and I think we do, have sort of Maisie's character development throughout the whole of the series. So I'm really, really looking forward to it. One of the reasons I didn't think I'd like this is because it's compared on this little comment on the front to the #1 Ladies Detective Agency, which I really, really dislike. So that sort of worried me, but I was really, really pleased with this. Then, so I've got 3 books that I've just started. This one, I'm just about under halfway through, is Ghosts from the Library. So this is a short story collection, Lost Tales of Terror and the Supernatural, by a whole host of authors. So, for example, Agatha Christie, Daphne du Maurier, Arthur Conan Doyle, and others. So one of my goals for this year was to read more short story collections. It was really to read the short story collections that are sitting on my shelves. I haven't yet finished that Wordsworth classic short story collection that I started earlier in the month. But when I saw this in the library, I just really wanted to read it now, because it's winter, which I think is a good time for reading ghost stories. So I am enjoying it so far. My 2 favourites were one called The Green Dress by Anthony Barclay, who's one of my favourite crime authors, which was about an artist who finds a green dress in a chest, and he paints a picture of the woman who he imagines to have worn this green dress. That was a really good story. And then the Agatha Christie one, here it is one I've just read, and it was excellent. So the Agatha Christie one is called Personal Call, and it takes the form of a play. And it's about a man who one day gets this phone call from a woman, and he can't understand how this woman has called him, because, well, she shouldn't be able to be calling him, put it that way. It was excellent. It was ghostly, as all these stories are ghostly, but also some strong Christie elements. So I'm enjoying that. And then I started, I think last night, reading Stoner by John Williams. I'm only about 50 pages in, but I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So this, which prompt was that on the Past and Future Readathon, Stoner fulfills the prompt bucket list, read a book from your bucket list, or that you've always meant to get to. So Stoner's one that I've been meaning to read for a few years now, because it just really sounded like my kind of book, and immediately I think it definitely is my kind of book. So I'll save my thoughts for later in this video once I've finished it. Then the other book I've just started is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. This is a reread. So I've had a headache the last couple of days, which is very annoying. So I thought I'd see if any of the books I'm planning on reading in January are available on audiobook. Fortunately, my library has the audio of Girl, Woman, Other available. First time I read this, when it first came out, I read it physically. So actually it's probably quite a nice idea to try it in audio in a different format. I'm thoroughly enjoying it so far. It's a good audiobook. I'm not a big audiobook listener, but this one is working for me. So yeah, only sort of a few chapters in so far, but really enjoying it. This fulfills the prompt from the Past and Future Readathon of reread an old favourite. I say an old favourite, I mean I read it when it first came out in 2019, but still, we're counting it for that. So right, I will check in with you at the end of the month. It's the end of the month now, and I have some more books to talk about. It's been a pretty good reading month, a little bit of a mixed bag, but we'll get to that in a moment. So I did finish reading Stoner by John Williams, and I really enjoyed this. I wouldn't say it's a new favourite, but I did really like it. It's about this man called William Stoner who, when he's younger, it's assumed that he will take over his parents' farm, but he decides he wants to go to university, and once he's at university he just wants to stay within the world of academia, becomes a lecturer, and it's about his life, his marriage. It's interesting because even on the very first page, and it's in the second paragraph, I'll read it out, it says Stoner's colleagues, who held him in no particular esteem when he was alive, speak of him rarely now. To the older ones his name is a reminder of the end that awaits them all, and to the younger ones it is merely a sound which evokes no sense of the past and no identity with which they can associate themselves or their careers. So it's quite a bold move, isn't it, even on your very first page of your book, to put it out there that this is about this character who no one remembers. But as a reader, you're going to read a whole book about him, and there's an interesting interplay, I think, between the fact that Stoner's life is not uneventful, because stuff does happen. Stuff, he has like conflict going on at work, stuff happens in his personal life, so it's not uneventful, but it is unremarkable to an outsider. And I was thinking it's quite interesting because I feel like none of our lives are uneventful, are they? But to an outsider, most of our lives probably are unremarkable. That was something I was just pondering on. But yeah, so Stoner is he sort of takes refuge in the world of academia, really. He manages to avoid sort of other life's problems by taking refuge in the university life. It's something he's very familiar with. Yeah, it's a good book. I enjoyed it. I don't have too much to say about it, to be honest. But I did like it. I thought it was well written. Yeah, that was that. Next, where should we go next? Let's go for this one next. So, The Pisces by Melissa Broder. This is a book that I picked up secondhand last year, and I remember when I hauled it at the time saying that I thought I was either going to love this book or I was going to hate it. Like, I didn't think there was going to be any middle ground with it, and I was right about that. I did have one of those two reactions to this book, and I loved it. I loved it. So it was very nearly a 5-star as well. I actually, when I finished it, I marked it on Storygraph as a 5-star, and then half an hour later I bumped it down to 4.5 because I was like, no, maybe not quite. But I really liked it. So it is about a woman who has a relationship with a merman. The cover art has her embracing like an actual fish. He is a merman, so it's not like as weird as the cover art would have you believe. But he doesn't even make an appearance until about halfway through the book. So it's about this woman who is depressed, who goes to spend some time away in a place that her sister owns near to the beach, and she's looking after her sister's dog while she stays there. She joins this support group for women who have sort of various problems going on in their lives. It's a really funny book. It's described on the cover as being laugh out loud funny, and I actually did laugh out loud on several occasions while reading this, particularly during sort of the first half of the book. I think humour's very personal, isn't it? So not everyone is going to get on with the humour in this book, of course, but I did find it really funny, and I think I do like books that discuss mental illness but merge that with humour. So in a sort of similar vein to Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. I really, really liked it. I could relate to some of the stuff in here. It spoke to the depressive in me. The relationship with the merman, who she gets to know, was actually quite moving in parts, and there were things about that relationship that I just thought were really, really well done. It's quite bold in parts, and like there's a certain scene between the two of them, which I won't say what it is because it would kind of be a spoiler, but it was something that shocked me to start with when I was reading it. But actually, what is more shocking is the fact that I was only shocked because I've never read it in a book before, and it's nothing like really weird, but it's something that is kind of a bit taboo but really shouldn't be. And so I sort of liked that it went there and it sort of pushed those boundaries a little bit. It really is nothing weird. Yeah, there is some animal cruelty in the book, and I guess that was why I ended up knocking it down to a 4.5. Like, I can see the purpose that serves within the story. I can see the point that the author's making with including that. However, I don't know, I just could have done without it. And I do think that, understandably, a lot of people would not want to read this book knowing that there is that animal cruelty in there, and I get that, and that's why I wanted to flag that and to mention that so that people were aware. Another weird thing about the book is that I feel like if I were to reread it in a few years' time, I feel like I could just as easily hate this book on a reread, like depending on what mood I was in when I picked it up. I feel like my reaction is sort of a hair's breadth away between loving it and hating it. I don't know if that makes sense, and I've never quite felt like that about a book before, but I do feel like I could reread it, not find the humour funny. I might really, really hate the main character. Like, the main character, I should say, is reasonably unlikable, I would say, which like, I normally like that kind of thing, and I did like it, but I just feel like on another day I might be like, yeah, no. So, yeah, but I did really love it, and I sort of read it and got to the end and was like, what did I just read? But also that was great. So I am looking forward to reading more by Melissa Broder, because my library does have a couple of her books. Then I picked up for Moody Monday. So one of the prompts on the Past and Future Readathon bingo board is Moody Monday, so just to pick a mood reader on a Monday. And I picked this one. This is The Millhouse Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji, and it's translated from Japanese by, Ho-Ling Wong. So this author has written many other crime novels. The only one I've read is The Decagon House Murders, which I loved. That is inspired by And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, and I thought that was a really, really great book. This one, The Millhouse Murders, to me was a little bit disappointing. Like, it was just okay. What's it about? So, we are set in two timelines a year apart, in 1985 and in 1986. So in the previous timeline, in this house, which is owned by this man who lives there with his very young wife, he is in a wheelchair and he always wears a mask on his face because he was in a car accident and he doesn't want people to see his scars. So he lives there with his young wife. His wife never really goes out. She's lived a very isolated life. So in the past timeline, these visitors have come to the house to look at this art collection. They go there every year to look at this art collection. And while they are there, stuff happens. Someone dies, a painting goes missing, and someone disappears from a seemingly sort of locked room, as in there was people outside who didn't see this man come out the room, so where on earth did he go to? So there's all these mysteries in the past timeline, and then the current timeline, a year later, we have a detective who's come on the scene to the house, and we have sort of the same characters who were there a year ago are there again. So the detective is trying to figure out what happened, and also we have some death happens in the current timeline as well. Now, my issues with this were I did feel like it got a bit slow. It was a bit slow to get started. I found myself getting confused between the characters. There is a character list at the start, which I did have to refer back to many times. I mean, there's not that many characters. You know, this is not a long list. But they just didn't feel terribly distinct to me. This is something I tend to have a problem with, so it may just be a me thing. And I did kind of think of DNFing at about the halfway point, but then the mystery started to get a little bit more interesting. So I did keep going, and it was a quick read. When the reveals come towards the end, I liked the reveals. It was entertaining. I will say that certain aspects I thought were a little bit too predictable. Really, and I don't like to be able to guess the solution. I didn't guess everything, some of it I did guess. So yeah, it was okay. It was okay. I would recommend the Decagon House Murders much more than I would recommend this one. So in terms of the Past and Future Readathon then, the only prompt I didn't pick up a book for was the one that was like read the oldest book on your shelf. I was either going to read The Unconsoled by Ishiguro or The Loving Spirit by Du Maurier, and I just wasn't in the mood to read either of those books in January, so that's fine. I did pick up a book for all the other prompts, although some of those books I did DNF, but hey, I think I made a good effort to participate in the readathon and I did enjoy it. Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo I'm still listening to. I've got about 2.5 hours left on that audio book. Really enjoying it, but I'm going to save my thoughts on that for February's wrap up. I finished this short story collection, Ghosts from the Library, that I think I mentioned earlier in this video. This was a real mixed bag. So short story collections that are by a number of different authors, I tend to give them like a 3-star because some I like, some I don't like. This one, there really was quite a lot of variation in my enjoyment. 3 of the stories I DNF'd, but some of them I did really like, so quite a mixed bag. And I have not yet finished this other short story collection that I was reading, which is the Wordsworth Classics one. I'm about just over halfway through, but I did DNF a story by Robert Louis Stevenson because it was just quite boring, but that's fine, that can go into February. So is that everything? I think those are all the books I've read in January. I feel like I am forgetting something, but I don't think I am. In other news, I'm on leave this week. February's got off to a good start reading wise, which you'll see in February's wrap up. But this morning I found a new book shop and it was very exciting. I mean, it's not new. I stumbled across it because I was in a different part of town. I had an appointment and I bought like 11 books for £31, which is good, and like some really good books. I'm so excited. So I will do a book haul soon. It's absolutely made my day finding this this used book store. It was so good. Like, it was the kind of shop where you go in and there's like, stuff was organised by like category, but there was also just like piles of books everywhere. It was so good. And I was walking around with like a big pile of books and someone thought I worked there. And I was like, oh no, I don't work here. But then she still asked me where a section was and I was like, oh yeah, I think it's over there. So, you know, they should have paid me really. But yeah, that was exciting. Anyway, let me know what you've been reading in January. Thank you for watching and I'll speak to you again very soon. Bye.